Welcome to the graduation ceremony of Mind Like Water Feet Notion, which is my 4 week live cohort based course on mindful planning. Honestly, it's quite surreal to realize that this day is finally here. I wrote down the very first footprint of an idea for a course like this on December 25th, 2020. And now, more than 9 months later, we just finished running the first cohort of this course. So, to every single student who enrolled and who is with me on the Zoom call right now, who invested time and money and their energy the past few weeks, thank you so much. And thanks to everyone who's watching this via live stream on LinkedIn and might be watching this in the future, the recorded version, and just joining us for this short celebration. Um, and of course, an extremely, really big thank you to someone very special who has joined us today to spend some time with us. David Allen is a productivity aficionado and the creator of Getting Things Done, which really has transcended from being a book to now being a system, a framework, and really a mindset. It has been read by millions of people around the world in the past 2 decades and been published in over 28 languages the last time I checked. So if you're hearing the term GTD for the first time, you can think of it as a robust project management system that will help you transform from someone who is overwhelmed with the amount of information and things you have to get done every day to someone who is focused, clear, confident, and has a mind like water. You would think David must have spent his life as a writer to write this masterpiece, but interestingly, he has taken on many avatars, more than I've seen in most people. Um, David, you've been a karate teacher, a magician, a waiter, travel agent, a gas station manager, and honestly, too many more for me to mention in this call. Since GTD attained global fame, David has dedicated his life to helping people across the world implement this technology and this methodology for a stress-free life and still continues to do so. David, what an honor to have you here. I've read GTD twice and I learn a new insight on every single page I read it. And we also sent this as a welcome gift to all of the students who are watching this right now on this call. And in many ways, the book acted as a spark for me to begin experimenting with my productivity system and build my current one, which I taught in this course. So thank you for being an inspiration and just being here with us. Welcome.
Sure. My pleasure, Sandara. Thanks for the invitation. Happy to be here. Hope I can add some insights or perspectives for people that they may be able to use.
That's very humble of you. Welcome. Um, so, well, I want to start off with just talking about your various avatars. You've taken so many throughout your entire life, but somehow over the past 30 years or so, it's it seems like it's been this one avatar of spreading the message of the incredible system you built. I read that the starting point for this was sometime in the 1980s when you were asked to design a program for managers at Lockheed. So, what made you go from being this polymath to being focused on just this one avatar for the past 3 decades?
Well, one of the reasons I had so many jobs was because I was more interested in self-development and finding out who I was rather than being materially successful. So I've never been that profound a entrepreneur or into materiality that much. I like comfortable lifestyle, but I was more into exploring myself. And come on, I was an American intellectual history major in Berkeley in 1968. If you'd told me I was going to be in the corporate training world, I'd said, well, what are you smoking? Come on, who are you kidding? However, because of my explorations in martial arts, meditation, spiritual practices, etc., I started to discover the value of clear space. So I had this sort of notion, or at least this reference point internally about clear space. Now, all those different jobs, I just needed to pay the rent. They weren't paying people to explore themselves. And rice bowl and cave was not my style. So, so had to get a job. It turned out I had friends who seemed to know what they wanted to do and were starting businesses and had small businesses and so forth. So I became a really good number two guy. So I helped a lot of my friends with their businesses. That's where a lot of my jobs were. I helped a couple of guys start a restaurant in LA. I helped a guy run a landscape company. I helped a friend of mine run a service station and a car restoration business and yada, yada. So that's where a lot of those came from. Of course, I just walk in and look around. Now, come on, all of you guys, I am the laziest guy you ever met. That's how I came up with GTD. With how little effort can I get done what has to get done? But back then I just walk in and look around and go, how much easier can we do this? Can we leave a little earlier? And there's some way, why, come on. Now they call that process improvement. Back then I just said, how can I leave earlier? And so I would help improve their systems and then get it under cruise control and then get bored. Then I'd go leave and go find another job. And then I discovered they actually pay people to do that. They call them something. Consultant. Oh my God, couldn't spell it. Now I are one, so 1982 hung out my shingle. I said, well, maybe I could just, sell myself on a project by project basis, because that's kind of what I was doing anyway, what I wound up doing. And that was my sort of initial foray into, okay, let me see just if I can sell myself in terms of adding value if I show up into an environment. At the same time, because I'd been so attracted to and engaged in clear space in my head, I found that as my little consulting practice got more successful, I found that tended to screw up clear space pretty fast. As my life got more complicated and complex and more agreements and more things to manage, I said, well, wait a minute, how can I still stay clear while I'm getting busier? And that's when I began to explore the various different techniques that helped me stay clear. And I didn't wake up one morning with GTD. That was no grand epiphany. It was a long string of epiphanettes, as I say, over a period of time, where I get this piece here and that worked, and this piece here and that worked, and this piece here and that worked. And these are working for me. And then I turned around and I started to say, well, this may do the same thing for the clients I was working with. So I turned around and started using those techniques with my clients. And it turned out that applying these methods and these practices started to create the same thing they did for them, they did for me. More clarity, more focus, more control, more sense of freedom to focus on the cool stuff. So that became sort of the essence of, if it wasn't, I was hungry for a model to be able to pull out of my pocket in case it wasn't clear how to help people. If I could pull out something that I knew would help them, no matter what, I loved that idea, the simplicity of that, or getting down to the essence of the things that work for anybody and everybody, in that situation. And so as I was discovering these techniques and pulling them together and sort of starting to build this kind of methodology, that's when, the head of HR at Lockheed saw what I was doing. He said, wow, David, we need those kind of results in our whole culture. Can you take what you've learned and design that into some sort of a training format? And so I did, and it was quite successful. And then I just started, just out of referral, just got, led from one organization to another, to another, to another. So found myself in the corporate training world. Again, it could have fooled me, but it turns out those are the folks, at least in the 80s and 90s, the sort of fast track professionals in the corporate world were the ones most getting bombarded with tsunami of email and change and flattened organizations and all that. And they were the hungriest for what I'd come up with. So it turned out they were the ripest audience for what I had discovered. I knew even back then that it worked for anybody. It worked for kids, it worked for clergy, it worked for physicians, it worked for stay-at-home dads, worked for anybody that had a busy life. But then, and my consulting really turned more into a lot of coaching I did one-on-one with mid to senior level people in these organizations that either took the seminar there or read the book or something. And they said, gee, David, can you come help me desk side, help me implement what you come up with? And so that's why I spent thousands, quite literally thousands of hours one-on-one desk side with some of the busiest and brightest folks you'd ever meet on the planet, actually implementing this methodology and refining it. So as I say, it took me 25 years to figure out what I'd figured out, that nobody else had done it. Come on, I've never had a formal or traditional course in time management, business, or psychology. All my stuff just came out of experience. And so maybe that's why I came up with stuff. But it took me 25 years to figure out what I'd figured out, and that nobody else had figured it out that way, and that it was bulletproof. You couldn't punch a hole in it. If you implemented any of that, it's going to improve your life. Never had any exception to that. So that then gave me the confidence to go ahead and write the manual. Somebody said, gee, David, you ought to write the book. Well, how do you write a book? What the heck? So it took me 4 years to get the first edition of Getting Things Done out. from 97 to 2001. And then, and I wasn't even sure you could put what I had in a book. I wasn't sure you could get it. I knew, because I knew in the one-on-one coaching I did and in the training and seminars that I was doing, that people, if they hung out with me long enough, they catch this and they could actually start to work it to understand it. But I didn't know that if I put it in a book, whether somebody could get it. And that was a big milestone in 2001 in January when I first got published. And, I got an email from a woman shortly thereafter. And she said, "Gee, David, I was in Barnes and Noble, picked up your book, read it, implemented it, changed my life." I'm, oh my God, it worked. You can put it in a book. What an idea. But that was relatively recently, that I discovered we could actually scale this and we could actually, build a scalable model of this methodology that somehow, you didn't need me to get this. And then finding some sort of distribution channels to be able to get this to a much broader audience. And so that was sort of a big milestone in the next chapter in this work and the work that I was doing. GTD was just something our shorthand, and it just became this brand that kind of ran out from under us.
I mean, I didn't know the story in this much depth, and I don't think many of us watching also did. But it seems like it just began because you were experimenting with the idea of clear space and how to implement that using a system because of your training, and I assume martial arts and meditation as well. Was that the time when you were practicing a lot of time in that?
Yeah, it was. And also I had a couple of mentors. When I started the consulting, I said, well, gee, how do you consult? And by that time I was doing personal growth trainings. I was trained as a trainer for Insight seminars, and but all that was avocational. I wasn't paid for that. But because of that, I had a network, a pretty big network of really cool people. Some of whom were pretty sophisticated consultants for Boston Consulting Group and McKinsey and so forth. And so I started to kind of hang out with them and say, well, how do I find some models, that would work? And how do they do that? So that's why I started to explore the different pieces and how could I create some sort of a set of things that no matter what, if I got somebody to apply it, it would improve their conditions. So that's how I made that transition, if you will.
And it seems like even before you published, you had helped thousands of people with the technique already, just not in the form of a book. So did you expect the response that you got with the book after you published it?
Well, I had high anticipation and no expectation. I said, I don't know. I just need to write it. I need to get out of my head in case I get run over by a bus. At least it'd be out there as a manual. And I had no idea how much uptake there would be. I just needed to write it. And so I put, 25 years of my professional career into that book. That's why a lot of people get overwhelmed when they read it, because there's just so much in there. I mean, it's actually pretty simple stuff. It's not like some foreign language or some new technology. Everybody knows how to do everything that's in there already.
Yeah.
Right. But it's just a lot. And so a lot of people get a little overwhelmed by that. And, understandable. But I just threw it all in there. A lot of people write books and they only give you a portion of their stuff. I just put it all. So
yeah, because I mean, this is one of the two books you've written, right? The second book was later on was that a corollary to the first book?
Well, the second book with Ready for Anything, because of the success of getting things done, the publisher wanted another book. But I wasn't ready to write another book. I said, I gave you everything. There's nothing else to say. I did it. But it turned out that by that time I'd had a website and had started a newsletter and was writing essays, for the newsletter and the web. And it turned out that some of those were pretty cool. And so that's what we did. Was Ready for Anything was the second book. And it was actually a compilation of quite a number of the essays that I'd been writing. And we hired a ghost editor essentially to go through all those essays and kind of curate them to say, is there some sort of format we can make about all this? Ready for Anything was very cool because it turned out to be, I wrote a lot of those essays, and in the manner of the I Ching. I don't know how many of you know what the I Ching is, but it was basically a prophesying tool out of the Taoist thought process. Jung was a big champion of the I Ching. where you throw coins and you get a pattern, and then based upon that pattern, that's the answer. You can, it's kind of a Rorschach version of the thing. Anyway, so I wrote Ready for Anything kind of like that, where you have a basic principle and then a correlator to the principle and then a discourse around it. And Ready for Anything was a very fun thing to do. So that was the second book, was just a way to get some of my, because it was more informal. It's the stuff you could just read one short little chapter and get an aha or a spin on it. It wasn't like a whole methodology. And then a little bit later than that, we were ready to kind of take getting things done into a little deeper depth. So the third book I wrote was Making It All Work, winning at the game of work and the business of life. And that would just took it a little wider and deeper in terms of the basic principles of it. And then since then, I've co-authored now Getting Things Done for Teens and the Getting Things Done workbook. So, it's all the same stuff. As I say, I've made a career out of about 20 things I know. What's fascinating is how many ways you can frame that, how many ways you can say
Absolutely. And I feel like, it's the GTD methodology has aged so well, because you wrote this 20 years ago when the internet was just starting to take shape around the world. But even back then, you could see the rise of knowledge work, because I know that you quote Peter Drucker in your book and how he talks about this idea of knowledge work, and which is much more limitless than what we had in 20th century, which is more contained manual labor where you punch in a clock and then you leave at the end of the day. So what do you feel is a major difference, according to you, with how GTD was implemented in 2001 versus 2021 now?
Nothing in terms of the implementation other than the audience. The audience has expanded tremendously. Whereas in 2001, the audience was probably the top 10% of professionals in their professional world. Now it's probably 85% of anybody in the planet who's got any kind of a job where they have to think about what to do. So the principle's the same. The principle will be true 100 years from now. When we fly to Jupiter, you still need an in basket. You still need to decide what's the next action. You still need to have some organizational system that parks the results of that kind of decision making. You still need some sort of reflection and review process to see the context of all the commitments you've got, so you feel comfortable about how you engage. So it's universal. It's, in a sense, the principles are old as dirt and they'll be true forever. So it's more like, okay, who needs to know that? See, we're not born doing these things. You didn't hop out of your mom and go, gee, mom, what exactly we're trying to accomplish and what's the next action? Is that yours or mine? That's actually a learned behavior. It's actually a cognitive muscle you need to train about how to think about the stuff that has your attention, right? So I just had covered. You kind of fooled me, could have fooled me. I just wound up uncovering the methodology or the heuristic, if you will, of how you get your head clear about stuff without having to finish them. Because as you know, a big core or a key element to getting things done is externalizing all this stuff out of your head. Your head is just a really crappy office. Yeah. And I discovered that experientially 35 years ago, but now the cognitive scientists in the last 10 years have basically proven that. As a matter of fact, if you're trying to manage more than 4 things in your head, in terms of remembering, reminding, prioritizing, and managing relationships between them, you're going to not take a test as well. You're going to forget things more. You're not going to be as creative or strategic or loving with your kids. Period. That's just data now. So, but most people are still using their head as their office, and it's a really crappy office. So, sorry, don't shoot the messenger, guys. That's the truth.
I mean, one of the questions I was going to ask you is exactly that. Is that the cognitive science you mentioned? Are you talking about the Zeigarnik effect or something else there?
Yeah, all that. Yeah,
all of that.
I mean, just read Roy Baumeister's. He's probably the top cognitive science researcher in the U.S. anyway, at the University of Florida. And Baumeister's actually, when he wrote Willpower, he and John Tierney co-wrote the book that sort of popularized the idea of decision fatigue. And he and John flew out to Ojai in California, where I was living at the time. They said, David, how did you figure this stuff out 35 years ago? Because they had just sort of uncovered this themselves. Right. And Baumeister's work had a lot to do with, how much your brain could hold on to, and also how that you could relieve the pressure off your mind by having a trusted place to be reminded about the stuff in the future. So that you didn't have to finish a project, but you just needed to make sure you had some sort of placeholders in the future that you trust you would see at the right time to remind you about what you need to be reminded about. And that took the pressure off your head. Well, there's kind of a duh factor now, like, sure. And in a way, what I uncovered is just mechanical. It's not some spiritual thing. It's not some woo-woo thing. It's just how your head works. Your brain did not evolve to remember, remind, prioritize, or manage relationships between more than 4 things. Your brain evolved to do some very cool stuff, which everybody listening and watching this right now is doing right now. As opposed to, wow, I'm just dealing with vibrations of light and sound. You're going, that's a computer, that's a light, that's a thing, that's a thing. Yeah, you've got long-term, memory and pattern recognition, so that you make sense out of this strange, complex world of light and sound that we're all dealing with right now. The brain does that brilliantly. The computers are even just barely starting to get close to recognizing faces, and things like that. So. And yet you go to the store for lemons and you come back with 6 things and no lemons. Oh, geez, what happened?
The one thing. But then you didn't know any of this when you published, though, because you just self-experimented, and then you realized it worked for you and it worked for your friends and your clients, and then you published it. And then all of the science came out.
Yeah. To be fair, in my exploration, a lot of the self-development stuff and personal growth trainings and seminars I was in the 60s and 70s and 80s, there was a lot about completion. There was a lot about agreements, and that incomplete things take up your energy. And also, if you make an agreement and don't keep it, then there's a lack of trust and a lack of integrity. And so a lot of what GTD is about is just recognizing the agreements that you have. They're all with yourself. A lot of them include other people, but they're all with yourself. And if you don't keep them, or if you don't manage them appropriately, that's where a lot of the stress is coming from. And so I have to give credit to a lot of that training that I got, for various sources out there. So I didn't totally make this up to begin with, but that was where I started to discover, wait a minute, okay, if something is incomplete, if you got your attention on it, what do we need to do with it? And then how do I manage the completion cycle? How do I manage to capture what's got my attention, what I need to change or do something about or make a decision about? How do I manage that well? And so even in the personal growth stuff, that's just a small little percentage of what all that, best practice training was all about, kind of life 101 stuff. But it turned out that in the business world, what I uncovered was how fascinating it was to start to apply that to all the stuff around us in our world. And that you didn't have to go very far to see where to start to apply to get more clarity. Just what's keeping you from being clear? What's on your mind? Oh, I need more cat food. Oh, should we adopt? Should we really get divorced now or not? Or, gee, I need a vice president of marketing. Or we need to research that. I need to look into, yada, yada, yada. And most people have no idea how much inventory of their own commitments they've made internally to either think about, decide something about, make some decision about, or whatever. And that's all GTD did. Essentially, if we coached you, it would be to really get you one-on-one and get down and just unload all that stuff out of your head. And then we'd go through them, because it's a 5-stage process about how you capture it, decide exactly what you're going to do about what that stuff is. Is it an actionable item, or is it just trash, or is it reference, or what is it? And if it's actionable, what is the next action? And if one action won't finish it, what's the project you need to keep track of? So in a way, it's kind of like, I hate to use the word duh, because I don't want to denigrate people's lack of awareness of this, but most people do that. At some point, everybody makes all these decisions and does these behaviors when the pressure forces you to. So, what I discovered is, how do I get this stuff off my mind before I have to? How do I get back to, how do I get back to clear space? How come I got that's on my mind? Okay, what is it? Okay, well, look, I'll be 76 in December, and I'm still got a notepad and a pen. Best tools you can ever have, right? And if nobody's familiar with this, and if you're too young, remember, this is a pen. And this is paper. It's fascinating.
Oh, really?
It's a new thing that's occurred on the planet, where you actually don't have to open your computer to get stuff. You can actually write stuff down here and have access to it in physical form. Oh my God, how cool is that? But anyway, here was a little note I made, and because I thought I needed to do something about it. Later on, I figured out, oh, wait a minute, no, that was handled given something that I saw, so I just scratched it out. But that's why I didn't even remember I'd done that. Didn't need to, because it's off my mind, it's on my mind, it's off my mind. Later on, decided what to do with it. Boom. I still do this. You don't outgrow the need to do this. This is,
And
if you want to stay clear, come on.
So do you still do it on pen and paper, or have you used, do you
I
use
capture on
computers
pen
right
and paper.
now?
I capture on pen and paper. Maybe 3 or 5% I may capture on the computer, but for the most part, pen and paper, no batteries required, no Wi-Fi, and that's not my organization system. That's a capture system. Because later on, I'd probably throw away 85% of the notes that I make, like that one, right? But I don't want to force myself to have to organize in order to get stuff out of my head. I need to just unload stuff, and then later on come back and for more an executive role in myself and decide, what does that mean? How important is that? Do I need to keep track of that, et cetera? So that's why there's 5 steps to get control. Basically the capture step is first. And a lot of people make the mistake of combining, of assuming capture and organize are the same thing. They're not at all. They're not at all.
Because it's clarifying.
If any of you take notes in classes or take notes in meetings, that's not your organization system. Your organization system comes out of reviewing those notes and deciding what to do with those notes. Where do they go? Which ones are trash? Which ones you do not need? Which ones need to review in 2 weeks? You need to make decisions about the things you've captured. So that's why those are different best practices with different tools.
There's 5 steps for anyone who's watching. There's capture, clarify, organize, review, and engage. And of all the people that you've seen implement, where have you seen people get stuck the most in these 5 steps?
Everywhere.
Okay. Just
everywhere. Everywhere. First of all, people don't capture everything, so they don't really trust whatever they've captured because they know there's still more stuff out there. And even if they captured everything, they avoid making the next action decision about the actionable stuff. And so they have a to-do list of still amorphous, incomplete things like mom or bank or tooth or VP or whatever that still create as much stress as they relieve because you keep looking at it, thinking there's still decisions, and thinking I haven't finished yet about that. And once they've even done that, they come up with all the next actions and projects, then they don't have a system that they don't necessarily trust is complete and current. They don't have a complete list of projects. They don't have a complete list of errands to run. They don't have a complete list of all the stuff to their life partner about. So it all crawls back into their head. They don't trust their system because they know the system isn't really relieving the pressure because they still got pressure coming from the inside. And then even if they did all that and they don't review their system and keep it current, then they won't bother keeping it up. They'll say it's too much trouble because my head still has to be my office.
I feel like that's one of the review part, I feel like, is where I've seen people get stuck because in the course itself, we spent the past 4 weeks doing the first 3 steps, which is capture, clarify, organize in a unique way. And now I have told the students watching this many times that you have to sit down and review and plan for the next week. And you have to keep aside time for that at the end of the week, because if not, the system is going to soon become not very useful. It won't mirror your thinking anymore. And I feel like that's where I found
my little pushback on that is I don't plan for the next week. I just look at the next week. I plan as little as I can get by with. Come on. Don't over plan, don't over structure. Life's going to come at you, from all sides. Well, it just means I step back and look at what are the commitments that I've made externally, and I was looking at my calendar. And then what are all the other things, keeping all my list current about all the things I could, would, should do if I have time to do them, and then stay as loose as I can because things change, things move fast. So I'm not into, plans are made, usually rules are made when brains run out. So if you're actually, one of the reasons GTD is so cool is if you really do it, it allows you to be much more spontaneous and feel much cleaner and clearer about your just intuitive decisions minute to minute. as opposed to feeling like I'm overstructured or I'm feeling bad because I didn't keep up with the structure I thought I should do.
Hmm. Interesting. So do you sit down at the end of the week and look at your calendar for the upcoming week? Look at the what happened the past week? How does that look
Yeah,
like?
absolutely. Well, it's the weekly review. Come on, if you read that anywhere, the weekly review is a real thing. That's
Yeah.
not just a made up template. That's a real thing. After all these years, we said, look, you really want to get clear, you better sit down, at least take an hour, maybe two or half an hour, somewhere between 30 minutes and 120 minutes. Depends on how busy and strange your life is. At some point in your week, end of week or start of the week or whatever, and go through, what's happened in the last 2 weeks. Every one of you listening or watching this, look back on your calendar. You've got some OSs you probably didn't capture. The OSs. Oh, sugar.
I
I
okay, I
should
didn't know
have.
what that
Oh
was.
my God, I forgot. Oh, I need to. Yeah. That's the first thing I do is look back on my calendar and just look back at that to make sure I haven't. Come on, life gets crazy out there, guys. I don't have time every second, every day to keep this thing pristinely organized, but I need to build an oasis of
Hmm.
time, when I back off and then, can then look, first of all, I look back and then I look forward, what's coming up. And I look as forward on my calendar as I have stuff on my calendar. It doesn't take very long. I just look because my calendar is not full of I shoulds. It's only external commitments and things that I need to know about it that are very specific to that day or time. So I'm looking forward to see what that is. Every night I look at my calendar for the next couple of days to see how long I can sleep because I'm a big sleep fan. So I just need to know how long I could sleep in the morning. So that's why I look at my calendar the night before to say how long, do I have an early appointment or can I hang
Hmm.
out, with, whatever. And so, yeah, so reviewing all of that and then going back and making sure, every one of us has projects that have probably shown up in the last 5 or 6 days. You haven't, things that projects don't show up in a nice pink package. Hi, I'm a project. They don't. Suddenly you made a phone call and it turned into a weird thing that now you've got attention on. Oh God, what they said? Yeah. Come on. And you don't have time that very second to decide. The project is get clarity on this thing that happened right there, or get closure on this thing that I didn't expect. But the weekly review is the time to do that. That's where you,
Hmm.
as I say, bring up the rear guard of all that stuff that's happened over the last 7 days or so. And then, identify the stuff that's now got your attention that you haven't really clarified as a project with the next action on it yet, and get that current. That's basically what it is. So yeah, it's if you're not doing that once a week, you're trying to do it all the time and never doing
Hmm. Oh, that's very well
it.
said.
You find yourself in this stressful situation that there's probably stuff I should be reviewing, thinking about, deciding about, prioritizing about, but I'm not doing that. I should be doing that. I should be doing it. I should be doing it. And then you wind up just being driven by the latest and loudest, and you think that's prioritizing your life.
Oh, absolutely. So I want to give time to my students and anyone watching as well to ask questions. So I'm going to end this with just a rapid fire round of questions. Are you ready? Okay, you seem pretty ready all the time. Your book is filled with quotes, which I love. What's your favorite quote?
I don't know. I don't know. There's so many. I love good quotes. Um, Anything Oscar Wilde or Mark Twain said, or George Bernard Shaw said, are fabulous. All of them are probably my favorite quotes. So
Okay.
I don't know that I could pick one.
What's your favorite book?
I don't have a favorite book as such. I read about a book a month that just shows up intuitively as something to read. Um, my current latest book is, do I have a copy of it here? Yeah, here it is.
Okay, Humankind: A Hopeful History. Is that
Yeah,
a book on history?
what it is, it's about, it's a rant against sensational media, that a lot of sensational stories about the negative experiences of human beings are made up or exaggerated just for selling newspapers and selling other kind of things, and that the real truth is, and he's got a lot of really good data in there about the
Mhm.
truth about how really good people really are when push comes to shove, and especially these days, nice thing to read. And
Yeah.
that's really great. Another favorite book of mine is called The Antidote by Oliver Burkeman.
Mm.
Uh, and the subtitle is Happiness for People Who Can't Stand Positive Thinking. Uh, so, wonderful
uh,
book, by the way. And Oliver's great. He's a GTDer, by the way. And he takes a lot of the uh, uh, yeah, the he takes a lot of the stuff that's been people think, oh, negative thinking, or sort of looking at the negative side of life. He said a lot of it has to do with acceptance. Actually has a lot to do with GTD. Is a lot of people kind of resist GTD process because you're going to have to accept all the things you've committed to. That's
yeah.
a scary list, to make a list of all the things that have your attention,
Hmm.
right? And so a lot of his thing is the freedom that comes from acceptance of current reality, which is a whole lot of what I learned in my consulting practice as well as anything else. If you can't accept current reality, you're going to resist anything. But acceptance of current reality doesn't mean you need to like it. It just means you don't want to pretend it's not there, and then engage with it appropriately. If you're depressed, you need to accept you're depressed. Don't try to go yada yada. I'm not depressed, whatever. Don't try to pretend, that all that other stuff. Anyway, Oliver Burkeman's work is great. So those are two recently sort of favorite books of mine. And the
Wonderful.
Secret Life of Trees. I forget what the title is. Another great book.
The Secret
Uh,
Life of Trees.
yeah,
These are
how they
some
talk
great
to each other.
titles.
How they
Um,
talk to each other. Anyway,
okay. So one question I had was, of your many, many avatar, which one taught you the most?
sorry. Say again.
Oh, of all the jobs you've taken in your life, which one taught you the most?
Which one did what the most?
Which one taught you the most?
Taught me
Taught
the most.
you? Yes.
Don't know. Kind of, I learned from. I was learning all the time with all of those. If I hadn't answered that, what would it be? What taught me the most? Um, I have to say my own job, like as a consultant, taught me the most, because
Mm.
I had to just step out into the unknown and then try to make things up and figure things out, and throw myself out off the end of the pier and hope the water's not too deep or too shallow. You know? So I think
I
that's kind
remember
of that's
watching.
kind of that's kind of how I learned the most.
Yeah, I remember watching one of your interviews where you said that after all the jobs you had, you either had to be a consultant or a flake, and you chose to be a consultant because it's the better path.
And maybe a flake too. So at least another version of it. Yeah.
All right, final question. What's your favorite weird food combination?
Weird food combination. Is that
Mhm.
what you said?
Yeah.
Um, real, real wasabi and a really good steak.
Oh God, I cannot even eat wasabi. It's kudos to you.
But
Awesome. Well,
real wasabi is hard to come by. Usually, what you get in Japanese restaurants is just horseradish green coloring in it.
Uh-huh.
Real wasabi is a very special taste, and if you can get it, when we found a company actually in here in the Netherlands that actually grows real wasabi,
Mm.
so we'll have that probably tonight.
Wonderful. I see quite a few people want to ask questions to you. So I'll start with Rick. So please raise your hands if you want to ask questions first. And also, since Rick mentioned there, Dia, could you please spotlight Rick so he can join us on stage? Awesome. Hey, Rick, please go ahead.
Hi. First of all, I'm so humbled to meet you. Your work is one of the most timeless guidance I know of, and you've had a profound impact on my life and career and those I help. Another book that really had a big impact for me is by Cal Newport, or actually multiple books. And there's so many similarities in your work where you focus on attention and outcomes and the freedom to grab opportunity and to create. But I think what I try to see is you do time boxing in calendars, and he talks a lot about automating and stuff like that differently. So I would love to hear if you've read these books and what are your takeaways from them, and do you see that overlap, and do you automate things, and if so, what do you automate? I heard your org system isn't on paper. You don't need to go in what it is, but I would love to know if you automate a few things.
Anything you can automate, sure, absolutely. Why not? Um, and time, time boxing only if you need it. Time boxing as a just an intellectual exercise is usually too much. It's too structured. You're not going, you're going to be smarter 3 days from now, about the fourth day that you time boxed, you know. So, rules are made when brains run out. But sometimes, especially if other people are grabbing your time, then where you do need to block out time, especially if you've got a time pressure. Look, God, I need 2 clear hours to work on this business plan that's due on Friday, and I got a full calendar. I damn well better block 2 hours, on Wednesday, to get this done. And so, yeah, if you need that to clear your mind, but Rick, ultimately, what do you need to do to get clear? What do you need to do to get that off your mind? If you need a time block, do it. If you what you need to do is to trust that I'll know what to do at the right time because I'm working my system appropriately. That's all you need to do. So it's quite individual and quite unique to each person in each situation. So again, I don't make any templated stuff about that. I just know if it's on your mind, then there's something you still need to do to get it off your mind. And what that is quite unique to you. You'll have to decide that. Can you automate it? Sure. Hey, why not? You know, uh, we automate how long our French coffee maker should, at 4 minutes is how long that should actually brew in our modem pot, right? So that's automated, right? Try to remember 4 minutes in your head. Oh, good luck, right? So come on, how many things are automated? See, you only think automation about stuff that you're not already using, but you're already using a gazillion automated things.
Yeah.
You know, yeah,
And I love what you're saying about the cruise control of teams, and a lot of things feels automated, but it's still a lot of manual work and hours invested. But I really like what you said with the coffee machine, that you don't have to think about it. You make a decision and then you don't have to think about it. But I want to
sure.
leave space for more questions. But again, thank you so much.
Yeah, Rick, thanks for your comments. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Rick. I see Karen. Dia, can you spotlight Karen, please? Hey, Karen, go ahead.
Hi, it's really great to meet you. I'm a big fan. And I just have to say, I cannot believe, I think you said you were turning 76. Okay, well, I'm not just complimenting to flatter you. You just don't look that old. So take that. I have 2 questions if time permits. So I'll just ask the more important question first if time doesn't. So I have ADHD, and I don't know if you're familiar with ADHD or not. So that could affect, if you can answer me, how I have a lot of trouble implementing systems and structure and processes, even though I probably need them the most, more than like a neurotypical brain. Do you have any tips for that in regards to GTD in general?
Go slowly. Pick simple little things that start to improve that. See, some of your most successful people in the world are ADHD and ADD people, and what they've done is just build strategies to then, take advantage of, or to leverage the fact that they are high thinkers and high associative thinkers, but very bad at sequential and holding themselves down to that. See, if you were trying to implement GTD as an ADD or ADHD person, it feels like you're being thrown into quicksand to try to sit down and focus on a list. Oh my God, how tough is that? Oh, Jesus, whatever. But at a certain point, see, if you were totally disorganized, you couldn't get out of bed. So you already do a lot of organization. What do you like to do, Karen?
Oh, there's a big list.
No, what do you like to do? Do you like to cook? Do you like to paint? Do you like to, what's that?
Play board games.
Play board games. Well, tell me how ADD you have to be to play a board game. Come on. You're going to have to be very sequential. What your ADD or ADHD does is let you see lots of options, but then you're going to have to come down and make a move, right?
Mm.
So what do you do to make a move? That is all you have to do with GTD. See, there's no, whether you're highly associative or highly sequential, GTD will help. It'll help you, shore up your weak suit. So your weak suit would be, how do I stick with a structure, right? Because I keep bouncing off of that. Well, trust me, if wherever you live right now caught on fire, you would get very sequential. Trust me, you would, because you would have to. You're going to have to say, what's next? What's next? Where am I going? Okay, there's my outcome called live. Get out of the friggin' building. What's the next step? Okay, I need that, and I better grab this before I do that. You're going to get very sequential. You're gonna do that because you have to. So you have the ability to do that, but it doesn't come naturally, or it doesn't come as an automatic response to life. So, you're probably dealing with what a lot of people probably listening or watching this too, is the stress of opportunity. You have so many things you could think about, so many things you could do. Oh my God, I could do that, but maybe I should do that too. What if I did that? And the FOMO, the fear of missing out on that. Oh my God, oh my God.
Yeah.
And so that's where some of your stress may be coming from. So you may just need to be, by the way, as you get older, don't worry. You'll find fewer and fewer things that interest you.
Don't worry. That's funny that you say that. Yeah.
Don't worry. Don't worry. Age handles so many issues that all of you have.
Very interesting. I
Okay,
need
question
number 2. Setting
two.
up GTD and getting it all set up, and then I have trouble committing to it. So,
well, don't throw it all away. Throw it all away. Come on, don't kid yourself. Don't kid me. Throw it all away, and then you decide what's needed. Throw it all away, and see what then moves you.
Right.
Oh shit! I should have kept track of that. Okay. Live and learn. Throw it all away. Blow it all up. All of you, blow it all up. Every once in a while, it's a real good idea to blow up all of your systems and all of your stuff and then recreate it based upon the new world. Because the systems most of you made and your list you made probably was made from a time where you're not as smart as you are now. Me too.
It's a good reminder.
Yeah, blow it all up.
My last question is really quick. Maybe it's quick. What's your favorite digital tools?
My computer.
Do you use Notion?
That's my favorite. I don't know. In terms of apps on there, they're all Word, Excel, you know, those are just so basic. Those changed the world. Microsoft Word and Microsoft Excel changed the world. Not much else since then. The internet, yeah, a little bit, but all the rest of the technology is done to just speed things up and add volume. That's all. Hadn't really changed the nature of things, but word processors changed the nature of things, as well as spreadsheets or where they came from, you know, in terms of relational databases and so forth. Those changed the world. So, you know, those are fabulous. By the way, once you know how GTD and the thought process of GTD works, you can work any tool. All of these are cool.
Yeah, it's not the tool, it's the underlying.
Yeah, well, you give a good carpenter a bad hammer, he'll still do good work. You give a bad carpenter a good hammer, and he'll still screw things up.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
Sure.
Thanks so much, Karen. So, David, we have one more person who has their hand raised. So, Shimon, Dia, could you please spotlight Shimon? Go ahead, Shimon.
Hey, David. It was wonderful listening to you, and thank you, for coming, and thanks to Sandarya for arranging that. I had actually 3 questions. Karen already asked one of my questions. I had that regarding ADD, and yeah, you already answered that. So I'll just quickly move on to next 2 questions. So number 1, who was your motivation when you started your journey? We know, like, people who we consider as a productivity guru, or like we want to follow them, in terms of productivity. You are one of them. We are all inspired by you. And there was Al Nightingale or Napoleon Hill, who were inspired by others like Andrew Carnegie, or Al Nightingale was inspired by Napoleon Hill. So who was your motivation, or who inspired you in your journey the most? That was one of my questions. And another one is, what's your suggestion towards the laziest person in the world who thinks that he or she is not productive at all, or their parents keep telling them that you can be productive? And like you talked about your journey, that once you thought that you were lazy. So what do you think, that how can they actually change that perception, and what's your thoughts on that? What would be your suggestion towards them?
Yeah, good questions.
Thanks.
Well, first, who is my inspiration about this work? Nobody. I had nobody. I had some mentors who taught me different pieces of this. And, they were inspiring. I get inspired by anybody who's got something that works, that's good. So they were all inspiring people, but no one particular person. I hate to admit it, but I'm the guy who came up with this. And it just seemed to be, you could have fooled me that that would happen, but I keep looking around going, well, nobody else seemed to have done it. And so I was, I guess, just a pioneer in this particular aspect of what this stuff is. So I didn't have any one particular person that did that. A great mentor in my life was my spiritual coach, a guy named John Roger, but that had a lot to do with my spiritual and my inner work. That didn't really have a lot to do with this, but what it did was gave me a lot of more clarity that this was cool stuff to do, and that it fit within my spiritual context of being of service to people and communicating to people stuff that I think is critical from a spiritual, but a small s, not a big S, a small s side. It says, look, we're all here to complete and to create. You need to be accountable for the things that you've created. You'll eat it if you put it in motion. And so good idea to get on top of that one. And once you're clear, then you're still accountable to what you're creating based upon where you're focusing and what you're producing. So completion and creation is the essence of GTD. That's what it's about. Like, let me get control of all this stuff, and then get a lot of freedom to then focus on the things I want to create. and then have an effective way to be able to manage those things and manifest them. So it aligns with my spiritual, work and life and awareness, but it's not the same thing. So, so that was nice to be able to come up with something that sort of married both those things, where I didn't have to convince anybody of either one. Depends on what kind of game you're in, relative to that. So that's my sort of non-answer to your first question. My answer is like, yeah.
Yeah.
And your second one, how do you convince other people you're productive? Ask them what they think productivity looks like.
Yeah,
If they were being highly productive, see, productivity has a bunch of negative baggage as a word. People think, oh my God, it's more sweat, more work, more time, and I got enough. I'm already up to here. I have to be more productive. Oh my God. But if you go to a party to boogie and you don't boogie, that's an unproductive party. If you take time off for a vacation to relax and you don't relax, that's an unproductive vacation. What do you mean by productivity? It's called produce desired result. If you wanted to be more present and loving with your kids when you tuck them into bed and you don't do that, that's unproductive. That you're being unproductive. So ask your parents, if I were more productive, what would I be doing? Ask them. Because probably maybe I shouldn't say this. I'd say they're probably projecting on you their lack of productivity about something they want you to do. My guess.
Just one quick example I just want to share is that our prime minister, she used to, like get mocked and by everybody, like because she used to sleep a lot, and everybody used to tell you cannot do anything in your life. And she has now become the prime minister of our country, and she now tells everyone that I was the laziest person in my whole family, and now I have become the prime minister of this country. I'm so productive. I just wanted to, quickly share that incident with you. Yeah, so I think, everybody has a personal definition. Yeah, that's what you have said. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Productivity should be very personal.
Yep.
Thanks, David. Thanks a lot.
Sure.
Thanks so much, Ramon. Hey, David, just 2 more minutes. Rick has raised his hand again. Rick, do you want to join us again? Yeah, can you please spotlight him?
I've got pressed for time, so you're welcome to it.
Okay, another hour then. Rick, go on.
Yeah, thanks. And you've done so many big changes, like going from being a history teacher and now in a global organizational development, and you're moving from the US to Amsterdam, and so many big changes. And I find myself having done multiple leaps that sort of every 5 years, and I look back, I realize, how could I not see that? How could I waste so much attention on the wrong things? And I'd love to hear, how do you work long term with looking back and seeing how have you changed in what matters?
Good question. I don't look back that way. I look back and go, wow, thank God I did that. Thank God I learned from that. Thank God I had that mistake. Thank God I did that, because it got me where I am. If you like where you are, don't denigrate the rungs of the ladder, right? They all got me to where I am right now. And some of those, there's some of the things I regret that I could have done better, but I learned. And that was the learning process. By the way, if everything is easy, you don't grow. You don't change, you don't challenge yourself. And I think we're here to expand and express ourselves, but that doesn't happen if life is easy. So GTD does not make your life easy. It makes you in control, or it puts you in the driver's seat of engaging with what may be challenging. So, if you're in a storm on the sea in a boat, you just want to have as much control of the boat as you can. You can't control the storm, right? So in a pandemic, you can't control the pandemic. You just need to have as much control as you can, given what you're doing to manage, the limitations and the stresses and things that you need to engage with in that way. So I have So I don't look back at any of those changes as anything I shouldn't have done.
No, what I hear you say is a lot about being grateful, and I'm very grateful to be where I am. And the lessons learned, without them, I wouldn't be me. But
and by the way,
just
Rick,
help
that's
seeing and not fooling myself. That's what I mean.
That's a lesson I have to give myself regularly, is gratitude. Oh God, it's so easy to complain, to be, oh God, what happened and why. Come on, we just bought an apartment and did a serious renovation, and there are so many things we could have complained about, and we did. But then at a certain point, we go, "Oh, wait a minute!" But now, okay, and now what do we do, and how do we do this, and how do we manage it, going forward? So I think that's a lifelong challenge to keep bringing yourself back into the gratitude. How many things? I mean, all you got to do is read the news and say, how grateful are you, that you are not in that position that you see them doing, in Afghanistan, etc. Wow. So yeah, gratitude is probably, gratitude. The funny thing about gratitude is what it does internally is it allows you to affirm, I am good enough to have received this. And it's a very subtle internal message that you give yourself. Not that it should be a selfish thing to do, is to be grateful. But what happens is, it's much like tithing. Tithing to whatever your spiritual source is one of the things that the automatic sort of assumed affirmation is, I have enough. I have more than enough. And I'm totally grateful to whatever the sources that be, or the powers that be, to give them the opportunity to have these resources to give back into that. And so, there are gazillions of testimonials of people that started to tithe, that started to make a lot more money, simply because they started to say, if I give it out, I say I've got enough. And that affirmation called I have enough starts to then attract enoughness, as opposed to I don't have enough to give. And then they start to affirm, I don't have enough. So if you're not being grateful, there's a part of you that in a way, gratitude is a kind of a tithing of your internal process. It just says, wow, thank you, that I have so much cool stuff, and therefore so much cool stuff tends to keep coming to you to be grateful for. I've discovered that in my 76 years anyway. That makes sense?
Yeah, thank you so much. I have plenty of questions, but I'll leave the space for other people.
Sure. I can give another 10 minutes if you want it, but I don't want to take up your time. You guys are graduating, so don't.
It is an honor to have you here, so that's completely okay. I just wanted to make this comment. I see someone named Danny R who commented on my LinkedIn post saying that David and I worked together very long ago at a San Francisco startup. We even share a patent together. Hello, David. It was so long ago that I'm not even sure you remember me. Just wanted to say that. I'm not sure if you remember Danny R. Maybe.
Danny,
Are you going through your mental filing system? So one question I see from Rajesh, and after that, Rick, if you have any questions, you can ask. So this is Rajesh Sethi, the person who connected me to you, actually. He's asking, how do you decide what to say yes or no when a request is made to you?
I don't know. I have no idea. There's no rule other than good idea to. It's a good idea to just stop and take a breath and listen internally to what the best answer is going to be for you. I can't think of, there's nothing else I have as a reference point about that. And again, all the other things of managing our lives and managing our agreements and managing our commitments and seeing the inventory and the gestalt of sort of the life you've created and what's important to you, et cetera. All those things come to play about how you make those sort of instant intuitive decisions.
Hmm.
But I just need to trust the moment to moment decision making process, then to live and learn. I've made a lot of quick decisions that I regretted because I made them too quick. And made them because I was insecure and I thought I needed that, as opposed to, let me think about that and do a little more due diligence. So, due diligence is a good thing to do, if you have the time and resources to be able to do that.
I'm a huge champion of intuition, so I'm really glad you said that. And Rick, did you have any last questions? If
Yeah, I'll be brief.
Okay.
In today, we have so much distributed leadership and flatter organizations than we had when I started reading your book, maybe 2001, when people were at their job for a long time. My parents had one job their entire life and were very happy with it. And now it's so many changes, and we need to find better ways to lead ourselves. As you said, you went from writing for a select few who wanted to invest effort into doing better. Now, you mentioned 80% need this book. If you could grab all the leaders in big organizations for one day, what would you teach them? It's a big framework. And you mentioned to Karen earlier to be kind and to go slow. So what would you ask them to focus on first if you had their attention organization wide for one day?
Well, big question. I'll give you a small answer to the big question. Remind them that the world is going away from hierarchical. That what the pandemic did was it exponentially speeded up the change that was already in place. People working for themselves, not for the company. And the company was then having to subcontract and hire people for projects and hire people for this and hire people for that. The organizations have, I've been, for 10 years, I've been involved in holacracy, which is a self-organizing organizational principle, right? We have no job titles. We just have roles and accountabilities for those roles. So the flattened organizations have problems because they haven't clarified roles and accountabilities for those roles. Who's actually accountable to make sure that the budget shows up in this way? Who's accountable to make sure that we have a culture that matches our values? Who's got that role? Who can we hold accountable if something happens that's not up to whatever the standard is that accountability holds to? These are challenging questions. They've always been there, but a lot of companies have been able to ignore those simply because of the hierarchical structure. And they made enough money to not have to care about it. But now, as we start to flatten and start to undo all of those things, everybody's needing to manage themselves a lot better, a lot more. And people are going to have to get a lot clearer. Right? What's your role? You called yourself a chief executive officer. Tell me everything you're accountable for as a chief executive officer. And what's the difference between that and your board? What's the difference between that and your executive assistant? There's what they're accountable for. So these are the kind of hard questions that are just simple business questions. They're simple, accountability and how do we manage this stuff in that way. So I think given the flattening of the organizations and the speed of change that's going on, it's like my message to the leaders and CEOs is, who do you think you're leading? Right? And what do you think leadership would look like for them? Right? And that could be a very different answer for each one of those people sitting in that auditorium. Depends on what they've chunked off in terms of what they want to do. Where are you going? Are you trying to get out of this organization? What are you trying to do? If they're not clear about what they want, then they're going to have trouble getting clear about what they hand off stuff to other people, what they're expecting of other people to be able to make that happen. So I don't care where you are in any organization, you still got the personal issues about what are you doing? What do you care about? And what are you committed to do? If they're concerned about the success of their organization, I'd say, God, I'm not that kind of consultant. I've got to check with people that probably know more than I do about it. But I would say, are you asking yourself the right questions? What's your desired outcome? What's your next action? See, GTD applies to the head of the world as well as a 9-year-old. If you're on a board, you come back from a board meeting, you got a bunch of notes, you still have to figure out what the heck those things mean and what you're going to do about them, if anything. And a 9-year-old needs to come back with his or her pack, and pull out the notes from the teacher to make sure that mom signs it. Same stuff. So long non-answer to your good question, Rick. Sorry.
Thank you for great questions.
Yeah.
I agree.
All right. Wonderful. And David, you keep saying non-answer after giving a very insightful answer. You can't keep saying that. We're over time, but David, thanks so much for staying with us. I know it's 6:10 p.m. for you in Amsterdam right now. Do you have any plans for dinner?
We do. Have a bottle of champagne that Catherine, because we got some new champagne glasses, and we're going to celebrate the new champagne glasses. We have to have a bottle of champagne to have that with it. Then we're going to have ground lamb burgers and some wasabi and who knows, whatever. All good stuff. And by the way, hey, Phoebe, and just to say goodbye. You have to say the little daughter, little girl.
Oh
Yay.
My God. Her name is Phoebe.
Her name is Phoebe. Yay.
Beautiful. I love dogs. Bye, Phoebe. Oh, wait, actually, before you go, David, I wanted to close out by just telling this quote because I loved it so much. I was watching your interview on London Real, I think, and you said, it's really not about getting things done. It's about appropriately engaged with your life, being appropriately engaged with your life so you can be fully present. And I just thought that was a very profound statement. And I cannot imagine a time when I had to go before GTD, before the system that I have, and life would just be too chaotic. So thank you for making my life more manageable and in control, and for millions of people around the world as well. Everyone watching on live stream, thank you for spending time with us from across the world. Now my students and I are going to spend the rest of the graduation ceremony going over reflections from the course. If you're interested in enrolling for the second cohort, just visit mlwnotion.com/home and you can join the waitlist. Thank you once again, and bye to everyone on the live stream.